What if I told you there's a book, a sacred history so foundational that the authors of the Bible itself referenced it as an authority? What if this ancient text, mentioned by name not once, but twice in the Old Testament, holds the keys to understanding the Bible's most cryptic passages and its most celebrated heroes? Imagine a book that contains the missing scenes, the director's cut of Genesis and Exodus, revealing the untold stories of Adam's grief, Abraham's terrifying trials, and Moses' lost years as a mighty king. This is not a flight of fancy or a Gnostic heresy. This is the profound reality of the Book of Jasher. Its name in Hebrew, Sefer HaYashar, translates to the Book of the Upright or the Book of the Just. This wasn't a title of arrogance, but one of purpose. It was the official, meticulously kept chronicle of the righteous line, the historical record of those who walked with God in a world that ran from him. For centuries, its full contents were a mystery, a whisper among scholars, a ghost in the hallowed library of Scripture. But today, we will resurrect this ghost. We will pull back the thick veil of time and explore the incredible world-shaping stories held within its pages. Stay with me on this journey, for it is not for the faint of heart. You are about to witness the cosmic treason of angels. See the world's first tyrant build an empire on a throne of blasphemy and watch as a young Abram survives a literal fiery furnace. You will stand beside Moses as he rules a powerful African kingdom long before he ever saw a burning bush. This is the Bible's lost companion, the historical pillar upon which much of the Old Testament stands, and its epic story, in all its breathtaking detail, is finally being told. Our story begins where all of humanity's stories do, in the long, sorrowful shadow of a closed garden gate. Genesis gives us the divine blueprint of creation and fall, a masterpiece of theological truth in its elegant brevity. But the Book of Jasher hands us the intimate journal of Adam and Eve. It describes their overwhelming grief, not just for their lost home, but for the broken fellowship with their Creator. We see them weeping, trying to navigate a new world filled with thorns, toil, and the terrifying silence where once there was the sound of God walking in the cool of the day. And then comes the first shedding of human blood. Genesis tells us Cain murdered Abel. Jasher shows us the festering jealousy and the cold, calculated premeditation. It was a rejection not just of his brother, but of God's authority. After the murder, Jasher reveals, Cain's descendants became the architects of a new world order. They were the first to formalize rebellion. They built fortified cities, not for protection, but for defiance. They wrote down their own laws, a direct counterfeit of the divine will, creating a society where strength was the only virtue and self-gratification the only goal. Lamech, Cain's descendant, shattered the sacred union of marriage by taking 2 wives, and he boasted of his murders, establishing a culture of vengeance that would poison the world. But as dark as man's heart was becoming, the world's final descent into irredeemable chaos was not sparked on earth. It was ignited by a betrayal in the heavens. You know the cryptic, haunting verse in Genesis chapter 6. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. For millennia, this verse has been a source of intense debate. Who were these sons of God? Were they righteous men, or something else entirely? Jasher leaves no room for debate. It provides a chilling eyewitness-style account. These were not men. They were angels, divine beings from the heavenly court. The book tells us that 200 of these watchers, led by a chief named Samyaza, gathered on the summit of Mount Hermon and swore a binding oath, a pact of mutual damnation. They looked down upon the burgeoning world of humanity, and instead of serving as guardians, they were consumed by lust. They willingly, deliberately abandoned their glorious first estate, forsook their heavenly station, and descended to earth in a cataclysmic act of cosmic treason. This was not a celestial romance, it was a spiritual plague. They took human wives, defiling God's creation and blurring the sacred line between the heavenly and the earthly. From these unholy unions, a monstrous new race was born. The Nephilim, the fallen ones, the giants of old. These were not simply large men. Jasher describes them as beings of immense size, supernatural strength, and an insatiable, ravenous hunger. They devoured all of the earth's resources, the grain, the fruit, the livestock. When the planet could no longer sustain their appetites, they turned on the animals, drinking their blood. And finally, they turned on humanity itself, consuming human flesh and spreading terror across the land. But their sin was not just one of appetite. These fallen watchers became the corrupting teachers of mankind. They taught humanity the arts of war, the forging of swords, shields, and knives. They revealed the secrets of sorcery, astrology, and divination, turning humanity's eyes from God to the stars. They taught women the art of cosmetics and seduction, breeding vanity and promiscuity. Every secret that heaven had held back for humanity's protection, they unleashed for humanity's destruction. The world God had created as good was being systematically unmade, twisted into a nightmare of violence, black magic, and cannibalistic horror. It was into this impossibly dark age that a single point of light was born. In the righteous line of Seth, a man named Enoch came forth. While the Bible tells us succinctly that Enoch walked with God, Jasher describes in breathtaking detail how he walked. Enoch was not a hermit or a recluse. God made him a king, a ruler who would stand in direct opposition to the chaos of the Nephilim. Jasher tells of how an angel came to Enoch, taught him the ways of wisdom and writing, and commissioned him to teach righteousness to a world that had forgotten the very meaning of the word. For 243 years, Enoch reigned, a beacon of divine order. He established laws based on God's will. He taught his people, and they flocked to him, a great multitude seeking refuge from the surrounding darkness. He was a king who ruled with justice, a prophet who spoke with authority, and a priest who interceded for his people. He was the living embodiment of God's kingdom on a fallen earth. Finally, after decades of faithful service, God determined to spare Enoch from the world's final violent collapse. Jasher describes his ascension as a public event. Enoch announced that he would be taken up. A great crowd followed him, weeping, begging him to stay. He preached to them one last time, blessed them, and as he walked toward a mountain, a chariot of fire descended from the heavens and carried him away. He did not see death. He simply walked with God, from an earthly throne to a heavenly one. But even Enoch's light could not hold back the tide. The corruption was now absolute. The blood of the innocent cried out from the ground, and the very genetic code of humanity had been corrupted. God's heart was grieved, and he declared that he would cleanse the world with a flood of epic proportions. He chose Noah, a righteous man, perfect in his generations, to build an ark and preserve the seed of a new beginning. The great flood came, a torrent of divine judgment, washing away the giants, their monstrous fathers, and the wicked civilization they had spawned. The world was baptized in water, cleansed of the angelic stain, and given one last chance. After the waters receded and humanity stepped out onto fresh, clean earth, the promise of a new start was palpable. But the memory of rebellion is long, and the inclination to evil deep within man's heart soon found a new champion. In the Fertile Crescent, the land of Shinar, a man of extraordinary power and ambition rose to prominence. His name was Nimrod. The Bible calls him a mighty hunter before the Lord, a phrase that sounds almost complimentary. But Jasher reveals its terrifying, true meaning. The Hebrew can also be read as a mighty hunter in defiance of the Lord. Nimrod was not a hunter of beasts, but a hunter of the souls of men. Jasher tells us that Nimrod came into possession of the very garments God made for Adam and Eve in the garden, garments that held a strange power and authority. When he wore them, animals and men alike would bow before him in fear. Using this power, he established the world's first post-flood empire, a kingdom founded on idolatry, oppression, and the cult of his own personality. He was a tyrant of breathtaking arrogance. It was Nimrod who marshaled the people to build the Tower of Babel. Jasher reveals it was far more than a simple tower. It was a massive ziggurat, a slave project on an unprecedented scale, with a sinister, blasphemous purpose. The builders, under Nimrod's command, said, "Let us build a tower so great that its top may reach heaven, and let us make a name for ourselves." But Jasher records their full intent. They planned to ascend to the heavens and wage war against God himself. They even devised different strategies. One group would ascend and strike him with bows and arrows. Another would place their own idols at the top, declaring them the new gods of the universe. It was the ultimate act of human pride and defiance. And so God descended, not in anger but in divine wisdom. He saw their unity in rebellion and knew it had to be broken. He confused their languages, and the great project collapsed into chaos. They were scattered across the face of the earth, but Nimrod's dark kingdom in Shinar remained, a festering wound of paganism in the heart of the new world. It is here, into this crucible of idolatry, ruled by the world's first great tyrant, that a boy is born who will change the course of human history forever. A child named Abram. Jasher tells us that on the night of Abram's birth, Nimrod's wisest stargazers saw a terrifying omen. One great star rose in the east and swallowed 4 other stars from the 4 corners of the sky. They interpreted this to mean that the child born that night would rise to destroy Nimrod's kingdom. The terrified king ordered that all male infants born that day be killed. But Abram's father, Terah, a high-ranking officer in Nimrod's court, hid his son in a cave, saving him from the slaughter. For years, Abram grew up in secret, nurtured by God. And from his earliest days, Jasher tells us, he possessed a divine wisdom. He looked at the sun, the moon, and the stars his people worshipped, and he reasoned, "These cannot be gods. The sun is eclipsed by the moon wanes. The stars are hidden by the clouds. There must be one single, unseen creator who commands them all." This was the dawn of monotheism in a world that had forgotten it. At the age of 50, now a grown man, Abram decided he could no longer remain silent. He walked into his father Terah's workshop, which was filled with the idols he carved and sold. Abram, with holy fire in his eyes, took up an axe and systematically smashed every single idol to pieces. He saved the largest one for last, and then, in a stroke of brilliant satire, he placed the axe into its lifeless hand. When his father returned to the scene of destruction and demanded to know what happened, Abram feigned innocence. "The idols got into a great fight over an offering," he explained, "and the largest one picked up the axe and destroyed all the others." Terah, enraged, shouted, "Do you mock me? They have no knowledge, no power to do such things." And Abram delivered his checkmate. "Then why, my father, do you serve them as gods?" Word of this incredible act of defiance reached King Nimrod. Abram was arrested and brought before the tyrant. "If you will not worship my idols," Nimrod thundered, "then you will worship the element from which they are forged, fire." He gave Abram an ultimatum: bow to the god of fire or be cast into it. Abram, fearless, delivered his famous retort: "The fire you worship is extinguished by water. Should we not then worship water? But the clouds hold the water. Should we not worship the clouds? Yet the wind scatters the clouds. Should we not worship the wind? And man, made by the true God, can withstand the wind. Why should I bow to a lesser thing?" This was the final straw. Nimrod, his authority challenged before his entire court, ordered the construction of a massive furnace in the plain of Chaldees. For 3 days, they stoked the flames until the heat was so intense no one could approach it. This was to be a public execution, a spectacle to extinguish the spark of this new faith. Abram was brought forth. Even his own brother Haran stood by, his faith wavering. Haran thought, "If Abram survives, I will declare I am with him. If he dies, I will say I was always with Nimrod." Abram was cast into the furnace, and God performed one of history's greatest miracles. Jasher describes Abram walking calmly in the midst of the flames, completely unharmed. The fire consumed the ropes that bound him, but not a hair on his head was singed. For 3 days and 3 nights, the entire kingdom watched in stunned disbelief as he communed with an angel in the heart of the inferno. The heat was so great that when Nimrod's servants tried to get closer, They were consumed by the flames. Even Haran, whose heart was divided, was killed by the heat. Finally, Nimrod called out, "Servant of the God of heaven, come forth." Abram walked out of the furnace, alive and whole. That day, many in Nimrod's court, seeing this undeniable display of divine power, abandoned their idols and bowed to the God of Abram. The showdown was over. Faith had met tyranny head-on and had won. The Book of Jasher continues to shadow Abraham, adding profound layers to the stories we hold dear. The war against the 5 kings in Genesis is expanded into a major military campaign, showcasing Abraham's strategic genius and reliance on God. But its most poignant and terrifying addition comes during the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. In Genesis, the story is stark, raw, and moves with breathless speed. God tests Abraham, commanding him to sacrifice his beloved, long-awaited son of promise. Jasher slows the narrative down, revealing a spiritual battle that raged alongside the physical journey. It introduces a third character into the drama, Satan, the great accuser. As Abraham and Isaac journey toward Mount Moriah, Satan, desperate to shatter this ultimate act of faith, appears to them repeatedly in disguise. First, he takes the form of a humble, worried old man and approaches Abraham. "Are you mad?" he whispers. "God is just and merciful. He would never command you to murder your innocent child. You have grown old, and your mind is deceiving you. Turn back before you commit this terrible crime." Abraham, recognizing the voice of the tempter, rebukes him and commands him to depart. Undeterred, Satan then appears to Isaac, who is walking a short distance away. He takes the form of a handsome, concerned youth. "Isaac, your father's grief has made him lose his senses. He is leading you to be slaughtered like an animal. You are young and strong. Flee, save yourself from his madness." Isaac, demonstrating a faith as profound as his father's, looks at the tempter and replies, "Though he slay me, I will follow. I will not transgress the command of my God or disobey the word of my father." Frustrated, Satan makes one last, desperate attempt. Using his power, he creates the illusion of a great, raging river blocking their path. The water rises to their necks, but Abraham, his eyes fixed on the distant mountain, prays to God, and the phantom river vanishes. They had passed through every temptation. When they finally reach the appointed place, Jasher records the heartbreaking, faith-filled dialogue between them. Isaac, seeing the wood for the fire and the knife in his father's hand, asks the question that echoes through eternity, "Father, I see the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the offering?" When Abraham, his voice thick with tears, tells his son the truth, Isaac does not fight. He does not flee. Instead, he says to his father, "My father, do with me as God has commanded. But I ask 2 things of you. Please, bind me tightly, lest I tremble in fear at the sight of the knife, and my struggle makes your offering invalid. And afterward, I beg you, go to my mother Sarah and comfort her, for her heart will be broken." With tears streaming down his face, Abraham binds his willing son to the altar. He raises the knife, his entire being surrendered to the will of God. And at that final, breathtaking moment, when the steel is about to taste flesh, the angel of the Lord cries out from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham, do not lay a hand on the lad." The test was over. Faith had conquered doubt, obedience had conquered fear, and love for God had conquered even the love for a promised son. Satan was defeated, his accusations silenced. The covenant was sealed not just by the faith of the father, but by the courageous submission of the son. The saga of the righteous line continues, with Jasher providing startling insights into the lives of the next generation. The complex relationship between Jacob and Esau is transformed from a simple tale of sibling rivalry into an epic struggle between the covenant and the profane. Esau in Jasher is not a simple-minded hunter. He is depicted as a man of immense violence, a warlord in the making. His decision to marry pagan women from the tribes of Canaan is shown as a deliberate act of rebellion, a calculated insult to the faith of his parents and the God of his grandfather. Jasher then recounts one of its most stunning and unexpected episodes, a tale that provides the true context for the sale of the birthright. It tells of a fateful hunting trip where Esau, tracking game, crosses paths with none other than the aging tyrant, King Nimrod. Nimrod, still the ruler of Shinar, is also out hunting with two of his men. A dispute arises. Nimrod, arrogant and cruel, insults Esau. But Esau is not the boy Abram was. He is a man of the sword. In a burst of cunning and ferocious strength, Esau ambushes Nimrod, fights and kills both of his bodyguards, and then decapitates the mighty tyrant himself. As his prize, Esau takes Nimrod's most prized possession, the sacred garments of Adam, the very source of Nimrod's supernatural authority. Esau flees the scene, hunted by Nimrod's forces, and runs for his life. He finally arrives back at his family's camp, physically and emotionally exhausted, his hands still stained with the blood of a king, his mind reeling from the violence. And it is in this precise moment of depletion, reeking of death and full of pride from his conquest, that he stumbles upon his brother Jacob, quietly cooking a pot of lentil stew. When Jacob asks for his birthright in exchange for the food, Esau, his mind on earthly power and his belly empty, contemptuously agrees. Behold, he scoffs, "I am at the point of death from exhaustion. What use is this birthright to me?" It is no longer the simple story of a hungry man making a bad deal. It is the story of a man drenched in violence, who has just killed one king and sees himself as the new power. Casting aside his spiritual inheritance for a moment of physical relief, he chose the power of the garments of Adam over the covenant of Abraham. From there, the story flows to Joseph, whose epic is already one of the Bible's most complete narratives. Jasher's contribution here is not one of plot, but of deep emotional resonance. We feel the full weight of Jacob's 22 years of mourning, his refusal to be comforted, his life shrouded in a grief so profound it becomes his identity. We see the brothers' guilt as a living thing, haunting their every step, poisoning their relationships, their secret betrayal, a cancer in the heart of their family. And we see Joseph in Egypt not just as a wise administrator, but as a man in constant conversation with God, his unwavering faith a brilliant light in the darkness of slavery and false accusation. But of all the revelations contained within the Book of Jasher, none is more astonishing, more paradigm-shifting than its account of the life of Moses. The Bible tells us he was born a Hebrew slave, saved from genocide in a basket, and raised as a prince in the courts of Pharaoh. It tells us that he killed an Egyptian taskmaster and fled into the desert of Midian, where he remained for 40 years until he encountered God in a burning bush. But the Bible is almost entirely silent on those 40 years. What did Moses do? Where did he go? How did a fugitive shepherd transform into the mighty deliverer of a nation? Before we unveil this incredible lost chapter of Moses' life, a story that will forever change the way you see the great lawgiver, I want to invite you to join this mission of rediscovery. If this deep dive into the Book of Jasher is stirring your spirit and opening your eyes to the hidden depths of the Bible, please take a single moment to give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It seems like a small act, but in the world of modern media, your engagement tells the platform that this is a story worth sharing. You become an active part in helping others find this precious hidden history. Thank you. Now, let's return to Moses, the man who vanished for 4 decades and returned as the very voice of God. According to the Book of Jasher, when Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh at the age of 18, he did not simply wander aimlessly into the sands of Midian. His journey took him much farther south, to the ancient and powerful kingdom of Cush, the land we know today as Ethiopia. When Moses arrived, he found a nation in turmoil. The capital city was under siege by a rebel army led by a man named Kikianus, and the war had been locked in a bloody stalemate for 9 long years. The king of Ethiopia, seeing that Moses was a strong and intelligent man with the bearing of Egyptian royalty, welcomed him. Moses quickly proved himself to be a brilliant military strategist and a man of profound wisdom. During the ongoing war, the king of Ethiopia died. The army and the people of the land were in a crisis. They needed a leader, a strong and decisive king who could finally break the siege and restore peace. They looked at the Hebrew fugitive in their midst. They saw his courage on the battlefield. They heard his wisdom in the council, and they felt an aura of divine favor around him. And so, the people of Ethiopia made a decision that would alter the course of history. They proclaimed Moses as their new king. Moses, the man on the run from Pharaoh's justice, was crowned the king of Ethiopia, and he ruled with unparalleled success. To end the 9-year siege, Moses devised a masterful plan. The enemy's camp was protected by a massive moat filled with deadly, venomous snakes, making a direct assault a suicide mission. Moses commanded his men to go into the forests and gather the eggs and young of storks. They raised the storks, and when the birds were strong, Moses had them starved for a day. Then he led his army to the edge of the snake-infested moat and released the flock of hungry storks. The birds, being natural predators of snakes, descended upon the moat and devoured every last one. The path was cleared. Moses led his army in a victorious charge, conquering Kikianus's forces and reclaiming the city. For 40 years, Moses reigned as the beloved king of Ethiopia. He ruled with justice, wisdom, and strength. He took the widow of the former king as his wife and brought prosperity to the land. His 40 years in the wilderness were not years of idle wandering. They were his royal apprenticeship. He was learning to govern, to lead an army, to administrate justice, and to be responsible for the welfare of an entire nation. God was forging a deliverer. After his 40-year reign, the queen and the people, while loving Moses, felt it was time for the son of their former king to take the throne. They approached Moses not with a coup, but with honor. They showered him with gifts and riches and asked him to abdicate peacefully. Moses, a man not driven by power but by divine purpose, graciously agreed. He stepped down from the throne and, from there, finally journeyed to the land of Midian, where his fated encounter with the burning bush awaited him. He had left Egypt a prince, became a king, and would now be consecrated as God's prophet. This incredible story transforms our understanding of Moses. God's preparation was far grander than we ever imagined. The leader who would stand before the most powerful man on earth was not a simple shepherd. He was a king in his own right, uniquely qualified for the monumental task ahead. So, we must ask the question that hangs over this entire narrative. If this book is so rich, so detailed, and so historically significant, why is it not in our Bibles? The answer, ironically, is found within the Bible itself, in the very nature of its two references to Jasher. The first appears in the Book of Joshua. During the famous battle against the 5 Amorite kings, Joshua prays an audacious, unprecedented prayer. Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon, in the valley of Ajalon. The Bible records that God answered, and the sun stood still for nearly a full day, allowing Israel to achieve a complete and total victory. Then, the inspired author of Joshua adds a crucial, parenthetical note. Is this not written in the Book of Jasher? Joshua 10:13. This is not a casual remark. The author is citing his source. He is pointing his contemporary readers to a well-known, respected historical text to verify the details of this astonishing miracle. He's essentially saying, this incredible event really happened, and if you want the full battle report, the official record is in the Book of Jasher. Centuries later, the second reference appears in 2 Samuel. After King Saul and his noble son Jonathan are killed in battle, David, his heart shattered, composes a beautiful and haunting funeral poem known as the Song of the Bow. After recording the lament in full, the biblical text states, "And he ordered that the people of Judah be taught this lament of the bow." Indeed, it is written in the Book of Jasher, 2 Samuel 1:18. Once again, an inspired author of Holy Scripture is referencing the Book of Jasher as the official archive where this important national poem was preserved. These 2 references provide the key. The ancient Israelites did not view Jasher as divinely inspired scripture in the same way they viewed the law of Moses, Torah, or the writings of the prophets. It was never meant to be a book of theology or covenant law. Instead, it was their national archive, their official history, the state-sponsored chronicle of the upright ones. It was the historical spine upon which the theological and covenantal truths of the canonical Bible were built. It supplied the who, what, when, and where, so that the inspired books could focus on the why, the divine meaning and purpose behind the events. The original Book of Jasher, like many ancient documents, was likely lost to the ravages of time, invasion, and exile. The text we have today emerged from a Hebrew manuscript first printed in Venice in 1625, which itself claimed to be a copy of a much more ancient text preserved through the centuries. While we cannot claim with absolute certainty that it is a word-for-word replica of the book Joshua and David knew, its contents align with biblical chronology with stunning precision. It does not contradict the Bible, it illuminates it. It does not challenge the message, it amplifies it, providing the rich narrative soil from which the trees of canonical scripture grow. The Book of Jasher restores a sense of epic grandeur to the biblical narrative. It shows us a world alive with spiritual conflict, where the actions of men have cosmic consequences. It reveals the breathtaking patience and strategic wisdom of God, who prepares his servants over decades, molding them through trials we never knew they faced. It gives us patriarchs and prophets who are more human, more flawed, and yet whose faith shines all the brighter for it. It is a powerful testament that God's story is always deeper, richer, and more wonderfully complex than we can ever fully grasp. And so, after this long and deep journey, we are left with a profound question, one that I now turn over to you, the seeker of truth. Having heard these incredible stories of the fallen watchers and their giant offspring, of Abraham's survival in the fiery furnace, of Esau's fateful encounter with Nimrod, of Moses' 40-year reign as a king, what do you now believe the Book of Jasher to be? Is it simply a fascinating piece of historical fiction? Is it a priceless, non-canonical historical document that should be read alongside the Bible by every serious student of faith? Or could it be something more, a lost book that God has preserved for our generation to deepen our understanding of his eternal plan? I invite you to share your thoughts, your questions, and your conclusions in the comments section below. There is no single right answer, but the discussion is vital. Let's explore this mystery together. And if this journey into the lost history of the Bible has ignited a fire in your soul, and you feel compelled to uncover another of Scripture's greatest and most enigmatic figures, then you cannot afford to miss the video you see appearing on your screen right now. In it, we will use clues from both the Old and New Testaments to unravel the true, shocking identity of Melchizedek, the timeless king of Salem and priest of the Most High God, to whom even the great patriarch Abraham paid tithes. The mystery is deeper than you ever imagined. Click now, and let us continue this sacred quest. Blessings.